Hello Year 10s, this is the marking of the natural selection exam. Make sure you have your green pen and your blue pen ready to mark them. So the first question says, evolution is the development of new species over time. Evidence for evolution comes from fossils. What is a fossil? So a fossil is the remains of plants and animals. Now when we say remains, this could be bones, it could be shell or footprints or burrows. All of these could be remains of plants or animals or organisms found in rocks and from thousands or million years ago. And this question is worth 2 marks, so you needed 2 out of the 3 to get the mark. The next question we have, how can fossils give evidence for evolution? Well, fossils show change over time, because what you'll find, and I'm writing notes in my blue pen, is that older fossils are just a little bit simpler. And then that's how they give evidence for evolution. They show changes over time. The next question. A species of snails lived 4 million years ago. Scientists measured the width of 49 fossil shells of the snail. Here we have a bar chart showing their results. So we have the width of the fossil shell in millimeters. So they took the width across of the shell, and this was in millimeters. They counted how many shells had that width. So we can see a width of 17 millimeters, there were no shells, whereas a width of 18 millimeters, there was 1 shell. And we can see the most is the width of 24 millimeters, there were 9 shells. What is the range of the values for the width of the fossil shell species? So range means what is the smallest number and the biggest number of the width. So it can't be 17 because they found no shells, so it's from 18 all the way down to 30 was the biggest. The scientists cannot be sure that this is a full range of fossil shell widths for this species. Why? Well, very simply, if we look at the number of fossils they used, they only took 49 fossil shells. So therefore, this is too small of a sample size. So they only took 49 shell samples. And that's too small of a sample size to be sure that this is a full range of the fossil shells. The species of snail became extinct 380 million years ago. Extinct means there are no more of those species now living. So no more species of that organism living. Give one possible reason why the species have now become extinct. Now you could have had lots of reasons. So the reasons that I've written here were physical factors such as an asteroid collision, volcanic activity or temperature change, and biological factors could include things such as more predators, more competitions, a lack of food, lack of mates, or lack of habitat. Any of these could have been a possible reason why the snail became extinct. So next, we have a photograph of this lizard, a no-list lizard, and it lives on a tiny island. Scientists investigated how the leg length of this no-list lizard affected their survival. At the start of the investigation, the no-list lizard had a large range of leg lengths. So they had a large range of leg lengths. So let's say on this island we had some lizards with short leg length and some lizards with really long leg lengths as well, and these are all the no-list lizards. Scientists then placed 6 curly-tailed lizards, so different to these lizards, into the island. The curly-tailed lizard is a predator of the no-list lizard. So predator means that it hunts and eats the no-list lizards. So after the 1-year population, the no-list lizard had halved. So we are assuming that the curly-tailed lizard has eaten or the anolis lizards, and so they have halved, 50%. Now nearly all the remaining anolis lizards now had long legs, so we have the remainder of long legs lizards remained. So the first question is, why did the population of anolis lizards half? Why did they become 50%? Well, as you can see here in bullet point 2, the curly-tailed lizards came along and hunted and ate it. So they were eaten by the curly-tailed lizards. They were the predator. The remaining of the anolis lizards had long legs. Suggest, so you have to think up an educated guess or an answer, an explanation why they had long legs left. Well, I use an analogy. Usain Bolt is quite tall, and that means he can run faster. So the same thing we could say is that the long legs help them run faster. Or we're not entirely sure. We could say that the long legs help them jump higher, or we could say that the long legs help them to climb better. Any of these. And that's the first mark. The second mark comes from so they can escape being eaten by the curly-tailed lizards. Next, answering these questions by ticking a tick in the correct box. Which of the theories supported evidence for this investigation? Well, out of all of them, it's natural selection, because this is called evolution by natural selection. By natural selection. And which scientists proposed this theory? Well, if we look at evolution, the scientist that proposed it would be Charles Darwin, who proposed. J.J. Thomson came up with the plum pudding model, and Robert Hooke, we can say he's the one who discovered and talked more about cells. Next question. Here is a blue moon butterfly that lives on a small island called Samoa in the Pacific Ocean. They almost became extinct. A type of bacteria killed all the males before they could hatch from eggs. Only females were resistant to the bacteria, meaning they would not die caused by the bacteria. In 2006, the number of blue moon butterflies had decreased by 1%. 2 years later, the males were equal to the number of females. So something must have happened to make sure that the males had increased. Scientists believe that the change in the gene suddenly occurred to make some males resistant to the bacteria. That means they won't die. What is the scientific term for a change in gene? Now, another word for gene we can say, because it's a section of DNA. So if I ask you what the change in DNA is called, you would write down it is a mutation. Next question. The number of blue moon butterflies in the population increased quickly after the new gene had appeared. Suggest why. So this new gene or this mutation caused some males possibly to be resistant to bacteria. So the mutation might allow hatching, because this mutation they think made some males resistant to bacteria. Then butterflies with that mutation are more likely to survive and reproduce. That's where the mark comes from, and mutation there. This advantageous characteristic gene, so one that probably allows hatching, is passed on to the next generation. It's the gene that's passed on to the next generation or to the offspring, and that is the 4 marks there. The next question here we have, fossils give evidence about organisms that live a long time ago. Scientists have found very few fossils of earliest life form. Give one reason why. Well, there's actually 2 reasons. The first reason is that early life forms were mainly soft-bodied. That means soft body is more like the tissue of an organism, not their bone. The bone is what we call hard-bodied. So most of them were soft-bodied, or another answer you could have given is that they were geographically destroyed. So if there was some sort of earthquake, they could have been geographically destroyed in that way. We have a photograph of a fossilized fish, and it says here, it suggests how the fossil in this photo was formed. So the first thing that has to happen is that the fish is going to die, and it's going to be buried with lots of sediment or mud laid on top of each other. Then the soft parts would have decayed. As said before, the soft parts such as tissue would have decayed. The hard parts such as bones are not decayed. So, and make sure you're writing, when I write with a blue pen, you're using a blue pen, and if I'm using a green pen, you are using a green pen as well. Finally, the bones are replaced by minerals. Another word we could give this process is actually called mineralization. And those are the 3 marks you require. Well, you have 2 marks there, you need 2 of the 3 there. But we want to write all 3 just to be 100% sure. The species of fish shown in the photograph is now extinct, so we have no living species. Give 2 possible causes of extinction. Same questions before, and I have lots of answers that you could have given. As I said, you have the asteroid, volcanic activity, temperature change. All of these are physical, whereas more predators, more competition, a lack of food or mates or habitat are more biological. So my suggestion, you choose one from the 2 lists there, and that is worth 2 marks. Okay. Final question we have here. Modern fish species have evolved from fish that lived a long time ago. Evolution is caused by a mutation and natural selection. What is a mutation? So hopefully if you got that previous question correct, you know it's a change in a gene. Now mutations are actually usually random. They are spontaneous. So, but it's still a change in the gene. Here we have 2 pictures. We have 2 pictures. We have Phenoma, which is an ancestor of elephants, and then the modern African elephant. And this Phenoma lived around 35 million years ago. You see that they have a long nose, but we can see the African elephant has a long trunk. So what we can think of is elephants with a long trunk. If you had shrubbery at the top and leaves, that trunk can go and reach, that long trunk can reach the leaves, and that's how they get their food. Whereas the Phenoma wouldn't be able to reach the leaves. So an advantageous characteristic of the African elephant is that it can use the trunk to reach tall leaves, to reach the leaves. So both Phenoma and African elephant reach up to trees to get leaves, so that is their food. In the 1800s, Darwin and Lamarck had different theories about how the long-nosed Phenoma evolved into the trunk of African elephants. Now we don't need to worry about Lamarck here, he's not actually part of your GCSEs, but we are concerned with Mr. Darwin. So we have to use his theory of natural selection to explain how the elephant's trunk evolved. And remember, your teachers have explained to you to remember a mnemonics. So MV A, so my Valentine always sends roses generously, and we use this to help us. My Valentine always sends roses generously. The M is that in a population of Phenoma there was a mutation causing variation, which is the V, in a population. The mutation caused individuals to have longer, the key word there, longer noses. That's the mutation. And this mutation here was an advantageous characteristic because it meant they could reach and get more food. So now we have done advantageous characteristic. We realize that because they can get more food, they're more likely to survive and to reproduce and pass on their advantageous characteristic genes to the next generation. So we can tick survive, reproduce, and pass on their advantageous gene to the offspring. And this advantageous gene in this case is a longer nose or a trunk. And that's a really nice 5-mark question that you can get. The last 2 questions. In the 1880s, many scientists could not believe Darwin's theory was the right one. And unfortunately, there was a mistake here, so I apologize. It's just saying not believe in Darwin's theory. And to remember why many people didn't believe in Darwin's theory, we remember GEM. Remember, it went against God. because there was a lack of evidence, and because it was an unknown mechanism. And mechanism in this case meant that they didn't know about genes. This came from Gregor Mendel many years later. You can't say no evidence because there was some evidence, so you must have the words lack of evidence to get the mark. If you write no evidence, you do not get the mark. Last question here. Before the 1800s, many people had different ideas to explain where all living things of Earth come from. Most people believed in God, and they believed God made all living things.